The siege of Delhi was one of the decisive conflicts of the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The rebellion against the authority of the East India Company was widespread through much of northern India, but essentially it was sparked by the mass uprising by the sepoys of the units of the army which the company had itself raised in its Bengal presidency. Seeking a symbol around which to rally, the first sepoys to rebel sought to reinstate the power of the Mughal Empire, which had ruled much of India during the previous centuries. Lacking overall direction, many who subsequently rebelled also flocked to Delhi. This made the siege decisive for two reasons. Firstly, large numbers of rebels were committed to the defense of a single fixed point, perhaps to the detriment of their prospects elsewhere, and the defeat at Delhi was thus a very major military setback. Secondly, the British recapture of Delhi and the refusal of the aged Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah II to continue the struggle, deprived the rebellion of much of its national character. Although the rebels still held large areas, there was little coordination between them, and the British were inevitably able to overcome them separately. Outbreak of the rebellion. After several years of increasing tension among the sepoys of the British East India Company's Bengal Army, the sepoys at Meerut, 60 miles northeast of Delhi, openly rebelled against their British officers. The flashpoint was the introduction of the pattern 1853 Enfield rifle. The cartridges for this were widely believed to be greased with a mixture of cow and pig fat, and to bite them open when loading the rifle would defile both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. 85 men of the 3rd Bengal Cavalry stationed at Meerut refused to accept their cartridges. They were hastily court-martialed, and on the 9th of May 1857 they were sentenced to long periods of imprisonment and were paraded in irons before the British and Bengal regiments in the garrison. On the evening of the following day, soldiers of the Bengal regiments rebelled, releasing the imprisoned troopers and killing their British officers and many British civilians in the cantonment. The senior company officers at Meerut were taken by surprise, although they had ample warning of disaffection among the Bengal army after earlier outbreaks of unrest at Burhanpur, Barrackpur and Ambala. They had assumed that at Meerut, where the proportion of European to Indian troops was higher than anywhere else in India, the Bengal units would not risk open revolt. They were fortunate that they did not suffer disaster. The Bengal regiments broke into rebellion on Sunday, when European troops customarily attended evening church parade without arms. Due to the increasingly hot summer weather, the church services on the 10th of May took place half an hour later than on previous weeks. And when the outbreak occurred, the British troops had not yet left their barracks and could quickly be mustered and armed. Other than defending their own barracks and armories, the company's commanders at Meerut took little action, not even notifying nearby garrisons or stations. When they had rallied the British troops in the cantonment and prepared to disperse the sepoys on the 11th of May, they found that Meerut was quiet and the sepoys had marched off to Delhi. Capture of Delhi by the rebels. Delhi was the capital of the Mughal Empire, which had been reduced to insignificance over the preceding century. The Emperor, Bahadur Shah II, who was 82, had been informed by the East India Company that the title would die with him. At the time, Delhi was not a major centre of company administration, and although company officials controlled the city's finances and courts, they and their families lived in the civil lines to the north of the city. There were no units of the British Army or European units of the East India Company forces at Delhi. 3 Bengal native infantry regiments were stationed in barracks 2 miles northwest of the city. They provided guards, working parties and other details to a main guard building just inside the walls near the Kashmiri Gate on the northern circuit of walls, the arsenal in the city and other buildings. By coincidence, when the regiments paraded early in the morning of the 11th of May, their officers read out to them the general order announcing the execution of Sepoy Mangal Pandey, who had attempted to start a rebellion near Barrackpur earlier in the year, and the disbandment of his regiment. This produced much muttering in the ranks. Later in the morning, the rebels from Meerut arrived quite unexpectedly, crossing the bridge of boats over the Jumna River. The leading sowars of the 3rd Light Cavalry halted under the windows of the palace and called on the emperor to lead them. Bahadur Shah called for them to go to another palace outside the city, where their case would be heard later. Once inside, the sowars were quickly joined by mobs which began attacking company officials and looting bazaars. Some company officers and civilians tried to take refuge in the main guard, but the sepoys there joined the revolt, and they were slaughtered. Other officers arrived from the barracks, accompanied by 2 field guns and several companies of sepoys who had not yet joined the rebellion, and recaptured the main guard, sending the bodies of the dead officers to the cantonments in a cart. In the city meanwhile, the 9 British officers from the Ordnance Corps at the arsenal and led by George Willoughby found their troops and labourers were deserting, using ladders provided from the palace to climb over the walls. The officers opened fire on their own troops and the mobs, to prevent the arsenal falling intact into the rebels' hands. Only 3 of them escaped and received the Victoria Cross. Shortly after this, the troops at the main guard were ordered to withdraw. The sepoys there who had hitherto remained aloof from the revolt turned on their officers, a few of whom escaped after the sepoys left to join the looting. About half the European civilians in Delhi and in the cantonments and civil lines were able to escape and fled as best they could. First to the Flagstaff Tower on the ridge to the northwest of Delhi, where telegraph operators were trying to warn other British stations of the uprising. After it became clear that no help could arrive from Meerut or elsewhere, and the cart carrying the bodies of the officers killed at the main guard in the morning arrived at the tower by mistake, most of the Europeans fled to Karnal, several miles west. Some were helped by villagers on the way, others fell prey to plunderers. Full restoration. On the 12th of May, Bahadur Shah held his first formal audience for several years. It was attended by several excited sepoys who treated him familiarly or even disrespectfully. Although Bahadur Shah was dismayed by the looting and disorder, he gave his public support to the rebellion. On the 16th of May, sepoys and palace servants killed 52 British who had been held prisoner within the palace or who had been discovered hiding in the city. The killings took place under a peepal tree in front of the palace, despite Bahadur Shah's protests. The avowed aim of the killers was to implicate Bahadur Shah in the killings, making it impossible for him to seek any compromise with the company. The administration of the city and its new occupying army was chaotic, although it continued to function haphazardly. The emperor nominated his eldest surviving son, Mirza Mughal, to be commander-in-chief of his forces. But Mirza Mughal had little military experience and was treated with little respect by the sepoys. Nor did the sepoys agree on any overall commander, with each regiment refusing to accept orders from any but their own officers. Although Mirza Mughal made efforts to put the civil administration in order, his writ extended no further than the city. Outside, Gujjar herders began levying their own tolls on traffic, and it became increasingly difficult to feed the city. News of the rebellion at Meerut and the capture of Delhi spread rapidly throughout India. Rumors and envoys from the rebels spread the tidings fast, and precipitated widespread rebellions and uprisings. But the company learned of the events at Delhi even more quickly, thanks to the telegraph, where the commanders of stations were energetic and distrustful of their sepoys. They were able to forestall some of the most dangerous revolts. Company moves. Although there were several company units available in the cool, hill stations, in the foothills of the Himalayas, it took time before any action could be taken to recapture Delhi. This was partly due to lack of transport and supplies. After the end of the Second Anglo-Sikh War, the Bengal Army's transport units had been disbanded as an economy measure, and transport had to be improvised from scratch. Also, many of the senior British officers were widely regarded as dotards, far too senile to act decisively or sensibly. Nevertheless, a company force was able to move from Ambala to Karnal starting on the 17th of May. At Karnal, they were joined by a force from Meerut under Brigadier Archdale Wilson. The British Commander-in-Chief, General George Anson, died of cholera at Karnal on the 27th of May. Under his successor, Major General Henry Barnard, the combined force advanced on Delhi. On the 7th of June, the Meerut European force, who had fought several skirmishes en route, met them at Alipur, Delhi. On the 8th of June, they found the mutineers had entrenched themselves outside the city. They drove the large but disorganized rebel force from the field at the Battle of Badli Ki Sarai, 6 miles west of Delhi, and settled into camp on the high ground 2 miles north of Delhi. The British had captured Delhi Ridge, and the Bengal infantry unit's barracks to the west of it. As a gesture of defiance and contempt, they set fire to the barracks. This was a senseless act, as it condemned the besiegers to live in tents through the hot weather and monsoon rain seasons. The ridge was of hard rock, about 60 feet high, and ran from a point only 1,200 yards east of the Kabul Gate on the city walls to the Yamuna River 3 miles north of the city. Fortunately for the besiegers, a canal ran from the Yamuna west of their encampments, protecting the rear of their camp and also providing drinking water. The besiegers occupied various fortified posts along the top of the ridge. The nearest to the city and the most exposed was known as Hindu Rao's house, defended by the Gurkhas of the Surma Battalion. South of it was a maze of villages and walled gardens, called the Sabzi Mundi, in which the rebel forces could gather before launching attacks on the British right. The siege. June through July, it was quickly apparent that Delhi was too well fortified and strongly held to fall to a coup de main. Barnard ordered a dawn assault on the 13th of June, but the orders were confused and failed to reach most of his subordinates in time. The attack had to be called off, amidst much recrimination. After this, it was accepted that the odds were too great for any assault to be successful until the besiegers were reinforced. Large contingents of rebellious sepoys and volunteers continued to arrive in Delhi. The majority of no less than 10 regiments of cavalry and 15 of infantry of the Bengal army rebelled and made their way to Delhi during June and July, along with large numbers of irregulars, mainly Muslim Mujahideen. As each new contingent arrived, the rebels made attacks on Hindu Rao's house and other outposts on several successive days. A major attack was mounted from 3 directions on the 19th of June, and nearly forced the exhausted besiegers to retreat. But the rebels did not know how close they came to success. Another major attack was made on the 23rd of June, the centenary of the Battle of Plassey. Although all these attacks were beaten off, the besiegers were ground down through exhaustion and disease. Conditions on the ridge and in the encampment were extremely unhealthy and unpleasant. General Barnard died of cholera on the 5th of July. His successor was also stricken with cholera and forced to hand over command to Archdale Wilson, who was promoted to Major General. Although Wilson made efforts to clear the unburied corpses and other refuse from the ridge and encampment and reorganize the outposts and reliefs, he himself was scarcely capable of exercising command, and in every letter he wrote, he complained of his exhaustion and prostration. Brigadier Neville Chamberlain, a much younger officer who might have provided better leadership, was severely wounded repelling a sortie on the 14th of July. Meanwhile, in Delhi, there had been some loss of morale due to the failures of Mirza Mahfuz and Bahadur Shah's equally unmilitary grandson, Mirza Abu Bakr. A large party of reinforcements arrived from Bareilly under Bakht Khan, a veteran artillery officer of the company's army. Pleased with the loot they brought with them, Bahadur Shah made Bakht Khan the new commander-in-chief. Bakht Khan was able to replenish the city's finances and inspire the rebel soldiers to renewed efforts. Bahadur Shah, however, was growing discouraged, and turned away offers of assistance from other rebel leaders. the siege. August to September. In one vital area of India, the Punjab, the Bengal native units were quickly disarmed to prevent him rebelling, or were defeated when they did rebel. Most of the available company units were stationed there, along with units of the Punjab Irregular Force, which were formed from Sikhs and Pakhtuns who had little in common with the high-caste Hindus of the Bengal native infantry units. As the situation in the Punjab stabilized, units could be dispatched to reinforce the besiegers at Delhi. The first to arrive, the Corps of Guides, made an epic forced march of several hundred miles through the hottest season of the year, which also coincided with the month of Ramadan, during which their Muslim soldiers could neither eat nor drink during the day, and yet they went into action almost immediately when they arrived at the ridge. The major force dispatched from the Punjab to Delhi were a flying column of 4,200 men under Brigadier John Nicholson and a siege train. The flying column arrived on the 14th of August. The rebels had heard of the imminent arrival of the siege train, and sent a force out of the city to intercept it. On the 25th of August, Nicholson led a force against their position at the Battle of Najafgarh. Although the monsoon had broken, and the roads and fields were flooded, Nicholson drove his force to make a rapid march and gained an easy victory, raising European morale and lowering that of the rebels. The siege train arrived at the beginning of September, comprising 6x24-pounders, 8x18-pounder long guns, 6x8-inch howitzers, 4x10-inch mortars. On the 8th of September a further 4 guns arrived. These were added to the guns already present, giving 15 24-pounder guns, 20 18-pounder guns and 25 mortars and howitzers, with almost 600 ammunition carts.